All right, here we go.
Okay.
Hey, it's no different than the flu shot.
Yeah, not too bad.
No.
A little longer needle, but other than that.
Cool.
You are all set.
Wow, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, I appreciate it, man. That's really something.
Hi there, my name is Bill Schwab, and I'd like to welcome you back to Northlight Photographic Workshops. As you can see, I got stuck in the arm the other day, and that was the first of my COVID vaccines. And any of you that are looking forward to your vaccine, it's a very nice feeling to have had that, even though I'm through the first one. The next one comes in a few days, and I'm going to be clear. And, you know, it's just one more step towards re-entry into the world is the way I like to put it. And I'm hoping that everybody gets down with it, and it looks like the numbers are coming down, and it looks like things are maybe going to be better this summer. So I'm back in full gear planning some things for the future, and I like doing these videos, and I love doing these videos, and I'm going to continue doing them. But what I really like is having people here in the workshop working with me, and I'm going to be offering some workshops coming up here pretty soon. There's a link below to my website and to my workshop website where you'll be able to find any workshops that are being offered. There's also some trips that I'm working on. My April trip to Faroe Islands had to be postponed back again until September of this year, but we're confident that by September we're going to be rolling. And even kind of cooler than that, I've got another planned trip planned for August, I'm hoping, as soon as I can nail it down with the outfitter, and that is to this remote Norwegian archipelago of Svalbard up in the Arctic Ocean. And it's way above the Arctic Circle. We're going to be going to a place called Pyramiden, which is an incredible Soviet abandoned mining town, and there's going to be a lot to photograph, and it's going to be quite an adventure. And you can also see links to that below in the same links I was talking to you about before, my workshop links. But anyway, I just kind of showing you that I'm getting vaccinated, I'm getting on with life, and I'm hoping that we can all do that pretty soon. And so I hope you'll check out some of these offerings that I'm going to have for you, and maybe come along on a trip, or maybe come on up here to Northern Michigan and come to a workshop with me. Anyway, that being said, today what I want to show you is how I get my negatives into digitized format for my printing purposes, whether they be you know, Platinums or Van Dykes or anything like that. I have to have a digitized image to do that. And if I haven't shot it with my iPhone, or if I haven't shot it with my D810 that you can see right here, it's negative format, and I have a huge archive of negatives. And over the years, I've been archiving them digitally through scans on a flatbed scanner, and it's been very unsatisfying. And any of you that might have done that yourselves probably know what I'm talking about. You get a lot of issues in scanning negatives with a flatbed scanner, and you know, probably the main one being focus and the distance from the scanning element. You know, light leaks, things like that. It really becomes kind of a problem. And over the years, I've kind of had some pretty good scans, but kind of unsatisfying. And then there's also the drum scans. I mean, I've sent them out to have drum scans done before, and they can be quite costly, and you tend to be a little bit more selective in that way, so you just don't play around with your work like you should, because you're waiting on these drum scans all the time. So unless you're lucky enough to have an old drum scanner and be able to float your negatives in oil and get perfect scans of them, this is the next best thing that I've discovered here, and a lot of people have. But I'm just going to show you how I do it. And the way that I do it is by taking my digital camera, my Nikon D810, and which shoots at a 36 megapixels, which is a really high resolution image. And I've been taking and starting to take photographs of my negatives and digitizing them that way, basically scanning them with my camera. And in doing that, you'd think it would seem quite difficult to, you know, hold your camera up, take pictures, get it all straight every time. But what I've got it down to now is a system of tethering my camera to my computer. And you can see a little clip of that right now, probably. But what I'm doing is I'm tethering my camera to my computer. So basically my computer becomes all of my camera controls. And then I use a light table here. You can see the type of light table I use. This is the light panel by Portratrace. And they're LED light panels. And the beauty of these newer light panels is that lighting in them is extremely even. And it's extremely well balanced for what you want to do. So they're perfect not only for looking at your transparencies and things like that, they're perfect for photographing your negatives in this scanning process that I'm talking about. Now, one of the things that I do in doing this is I have it tethered here through a program that's called Capture One. Now, Capture One is kind of a pricey program, probably somewhere around the $250 mark right now. But I would say it's very well worth it. Now, what Capture One is, it's a program that was developed by the phase people for, the phase one backs, the digitized backs, those kind of things. And what they've done is they've developed it as a way to control their imagery that they pull off those backs. But it works perfectly as a tether to other cameras, and it works very well with the Nikon lines and all other cameras as far as I know. There are other programs that will work that way, and as you know, I'm quite a proponent of Lightroom. And Lightroom will tether your camera, but it's hardly as robust as Capture One. You don't get all the camera controls that you'd like to have, and you don't have all the abilities of putting the imagery where you want it to go. This is just a much nicer program to use for this, so I highly recommend it. And I know that there's some other ones out there right now, and you may have one that's a favorite of yours, but I like to use Capture One for this, and it was well worth the price to pay for it. And once you've got it, you've got a lifetime kind of upgrade for it. It's just much like the Photoshop used to be. Now, it's very much like Photoshop in a way, and Lightroom. It's very robust. It acts like Lightroom does. It can help you catalog your imagery and help you do all kinds of editing, that kind of thing. I'm not going to get into that at all. All I'm going to do is get into the camera controls and tethering it so that I can show you how I copy my negatives. So anyway, what I've done is I've chosen an old negative here. It's called Pier Ruin from Cross Village here, not too far from my home. Now, I shot it in 2006, long before I lived up here, but it became one of my better known images, and as a silver gelatin print, it sold out through the galleries that handled my work. And I haven't made it available for a long time because of that very same reason, that I'm not going to print it as a silver gelatin anymore in an edition like that. But I would like to do some alternative process printing with it. I've never done a platinum of it. I'd like to do some platinum and some gum over of it. In fact, I'd like to do that of a lot of my older work that is, better known from my earlier part of my career. And so I thought it would be fun to take that negative and show you how to do it. Now, the other thing that I'd like to tell you is I have this cut out in a single negative, which I never do. I always keep my 120, which are 12 exposures, I always keep them cut in strips of 4 and held in these, these print file holders. But for the reason that I did this was Bob Carney, if you're watching right now, Bob Carney's a fantastic printer up in Toronto, probably one of the best printers in the world, I believe. He and I, back about 10, 15 years ago, were working on a project together, printing a group of 30 by 30s of my negatives for a show that I was having in Toronto. Now, these were 30 by 30 silver gelatin prints. That was quite an accomplishment for him and I to print those. Mostly Bob, he had the space at Elevator Digital in Toronto. But what we did is we had to cut them out because they had to be sandwiched in glass to be able to make them so big. And it wasn't going to work in strips of 4, so Bob had me cut them down to singles, which I never like to do. So anyway, somewhere in my archives, there's maybe 20 of these single negatives. And anybody that finds these in the future, you know that it came from Bob. Anyway, thanks, Bob. Thanks for that show. It was a great show anyway. So what I've got here is Pier Ruin, and I've got my light table here. Now, this is a Portratrace. You'll see links to them below at B&H, the type of light table that I use. Now, the other thing that I've got here is I have my Nikon D810 set up straight down on a tripod system. Very simple, and I've got my laptop right here, and my laptop is tethered to the camera, so I'm controlling everything through the camera. Now, you can probably see that right now, and I'm going to turn on my light table, and you can see how it came on in the program here. Now, what I like to do is I take the emulsion side up when I'm photographing these. Now, when you're photographing them through the back of piece of film, right? You know, the emulsion is laid on one side and you're shooting it through the film. Now, even though it's just a small amount, I like to be able to photograph right from that emulsion side so that I know that I'm getting it as crisp as possible, because I'm already going to have to lay a piece of glass over this. But anyway, one less thing to shoot through is what I'm saying. So anyway, let's get set up over here. So here we've got live view on the screen, as you can see here. And what I will do now is just very carefully adjust my negative so that it fills the frame here. Now, you can see how I'm doing this. I'm getting it pretty well straight there. Now really the best thing to do is to fill as much of the frame as you can with the negative. I like to get a little bit of the border around the edge of it, but the best thing to do is to use the most real estate you can on the chip in your camera, of course, and to make that as big as possible. So anyway, this is about where I like to go on that. I've got it set, it's kind of nice and square. So then what I do is I take a piece of anti-Newton glass that I've had cut. Now I've put a piece of tape around the edges of it also, just to kind of cut down on maybe me cutting my fingers, but also to keep it from resting right on the film itself, because even though it's anti-Newton glass, you don't want to get Newton rings in there between it. So then what I do is I take that glass very cleanly and I drop it over the top. So now I'm ready to go. Now as you can see here on the screen, I'm going to put on the glasses. As you can see here on the screen, I've got my image. Now, it's also flopped from the original, so I just have to realize that when I'm finally working my image up in Photoshop and in Lightroom. Now, what I've got here is I've got all of my camera controls over here on the left side. Live view camera, I've got the camera focus. Now, with camera focus, as you can see over here, I've got an autofocus setting here, and now what that'll do is it'll zoom right in on my film and it will focus where it's supposed to. Now what I can do is I can go over here also and I can blow that up a bit. You know, I can go up and I can see the grain in there. See the grain in there? Now you can see the grain is pretty well focused. Now I can fine focus that right on the grain of the film. Now you can also see it shaking. Now even though I've got this on a flat file and it's a very heavy piece, you know, there's camera shake. So what you have to do when you finally make your image is make sure everything settles out and then just press your button on your computer to make your exposure. So what I've got here is I've got my focus pretty well set. I just want the fine focus one more and it looks a little better for me to be. So I'm going to leave it at that. And now what I'm going to do is go back to my, I'm going to zoom back out of my, to my regular size here to see the whole image, and I'm going to set my camera controls over here on the left. You can see now I'm using an ISO of 64. The reason I'm doing that is I'm using the lowest ISO possible. I mean, I could go to sub levels of that, but they just use noise reduction technology, and I don't want to do that to my file. I'm just going to use the very lowest ISO I can shoot on this camera, which is ISO 64. And that gives me the least noise to go along with already the noise of my grain in my film. Now, this is basically second generation, so you are going to get a little bit of noise from your camera in there, and so the least bit of that you can have is the better. So, hence the the ISO of 64. So here I can change my exposures with the camera over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going at 1/15 of a second at f64. Now I'm kind of thinking that that's probably going to be a good place for me to start. So what I'm going to do is just give it a try. So what I'm going to do here is just make my exposure. There we go. You can see it'll come up on my right side here as an image in my collection. Now I'm going to go over here and right click it, and I can come down and say open with Photoshop 2021. So I'm going to open it up with Photoshop. There it is. Now I've got a really nice image of my negative there. So what I am going to do immediately is image rotate, and I'm going to take that and I'm going to I'm going to go to layer, image adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to invert. And so there, you can see my positive image. Now it's really nice. It's a little dark. I could probably go a little bit lighter. So I'm going to do that. Let's just take that out right now. We'll close it off. Don't save. I'm going to go back down here to capture one. I'm going to open up my live view once again, and I'm going to change my exposure up to, we're going to go up to a, let's just go up to a 20th of a second, all right? I'm going to take an image, take an exposure there. And once again, it shows up over here in my right column in capture one. I take that and I right click it, and I say edit with Photoshop 2021, edit variants, yes, and here we go. Open up Photoshop, it's going to pop up here in a second. There we are. I'm going to do image, adjustment, invert, and there, I'm a little lighter, it's nice. I've got a little bit more of the information down here where you can see down in the area where the rocks have been covered over by the surf. So, I'm going to call that a good exposure, and I'm going to leave it right there, okay? Now, what I like to do once I've gotten it this far is I'm all done with my light table for this exposure and for this negative, and I am going to work over here on the computer. Now, what I like to do is I like to take this, rather than doing my adjustments in Photoshop, I always like to take them over to Lightroom. Lightroom always is much simpler for me, and I have a different routine that I go through that's much simpler than the tools in Photoshop. I like to use Photoshop at certain steps along the way, more for my fine tuning, that kind of thing, and for an obvious easy thing like this, like inverting an image and having a look at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this image, I'm going to crop it down, and I'm just going to crop it right down to my actual image size for this. A lot of times I'll leave a little bit extra border in there because sometimes I like to print that border into my image. Sometimes I like just for reference of the film and the number it was in the negative roll. But I'm going to crop that out today for this. I'm just going to take it right down to the edge of the image. As you can see. And I'm going to hit my enter button, and then I've got my crop, okay? So now I'm going to file, I'm going to save this as. Now what I like to do is I like to keep a folder where all these are so that I can open them from that folder into Lightroom. And basically in my my Bill Schwab folder here, my main folder, I've got projects set up. And in projects, I've got a program, a folder called scans. And that's where I'm going to have this taken. Now, as you can see in here, I've already taken a couple of these before prior to this video just to practice. But anyway, so I'm going to save it in there. And I'm going to save it as Peer Ruin Raw TIFF, okay? So I've got that. I don't like to use any compression at all. So there we go, we're saved. All right, so now I'm going to go down here to my Lightroom and open up Lightroom, Penumbra. And then I'm going to go to Lightroom. I am going to open up my Macintosh hard drive. I'm going to my users. I'm going into Bill Schwab. I'm going to projects. I am going down to my scans folder. Okay. And as you can see, here's my new image, Pure Ruin Raw. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add that to my Lightroom so that I can work on it. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say import. And there we go. Now I'm in Lightroom and it's importing that image. It's importing my negative, now turned to a positive, as a raw image, not with no, no manipulation to it whatsoever yet. And there it is, you've got it. So I open it up here in my Lightroom, and then I go over to my develop module. And first off, what I've always tell people in these videos is I have to straighten up my horizon. I just hate those crooked horizons. And even though I'm guilty as anyone of making an image with a crooked horizon when I'm out in the field, I like to clean it up in post. So here we go. We've got that. We're going to go to my crop tool. We're going to straighten that horizon up a little bit like that. And we're going to do a crop on that. Okay, so now we've got, it's not even that straight. So I'm going to say undo crop angle. And I'm going to do it once again. Let's get that straightened up. There we go. That looks good. Hit enter. There we go. We've got our crop. So now you can see the image is kind of just basically muddy. That's how it was the night I shot it. This was shot at that golden hour, which was past sunset, sometime in the summer back in 2006. I remember the night well. But anyway, it was hard because when I'm making the exposure, I didn't want to blow the sky out, right? You don't want to clip your histogram. You don't want to clip the sky out. And you also don't want to take this beautiful shadow detail down here in the bottom of the print. You don't want to lose that off into clipping into blackness as well. So you have to kind of make an exposure that comes up somewhere in the middle, knowing that you're going to clean it up when you're printing it or in your post-processing. So what I like to do immediately is take my clarity and bump it up just a little bit, just a skosh. You know, you can see what happens if I go way up there. It really accentuates it. And I don't like to go that far because I'm not trying to obliterate that surface of water that's in there. So I pump up the clarity a little bit in there, okay? So I've not got my clarity set, but I've still got the sky. I want more richness up in that sky. And to do that, I'm gonna have to pull that down. And what I've done is showed you in the past in other videos on how I like to use this, my graduated filter up here. So what I do is I take that up over and I drag it on down. And I drag it on just a little bit past the horizon. And now I've got control of that area in my Lightroom here. So now I can drop that exposure just a little bit. So you can see I can bring the sky down just a little bit. I don't want to go too much with it, but I want to kick up the contrast some also because I want to delineate those clouds that are up in the sky a little bit more. Now once I've done that, I can also come down here to clarity, and with clarity I can kick up the clarity even more than I have in the overall image by just kicking it up in that gradient fill that I'm doing right now. So I'm going to kick up clarity. You can see what I can do there too. See how that brings it down a little bit, but it clears those clouds. It also clears a dust spot that you can see up in there. Now that's something we'll get to when we take it over to Photoshop and I do my more fine adjustments. Now, so anyway, now I'm going to bring the exposure down a little bit more just to bring that down just a skosh more. Okay, so I'd like it right about there. Now to clear that tool, I hit enter twice. And now I've got that set up. Now, in the same regard, the bottom area has gone a little bit too dark, and I want to bring up some of those rocks that are underneath the surface of the water in some way. So the way I'm going to do that is the same way that I did the sky. I'm going to take the gradient fill tool, and I'm going to bring it up from the bottom, okay? So we'll go over here to the gradient tool. I click that, and oops, sorry, I got to grab it one more time there, and I'm going to bring that up from the bottom into this area, up to about the horizon here. Now, what you're going to see when I go to clarity is you're going to see a little bit more clarity under there in those rocks. But what I want to do is I want to lighten that up a little bit. So I'm going to go up here to exposure, and I'm going to bring up the exposure a little bit. See, I could go way out there, and that would be way too much, obviously. But I bring it down like that into that area, and it looks really quite nice in there. Now I can see those ghost rocks underneath the surface. And that's what I was hoping to show when I originally shot this image. You know, you have your mind's eye version of what's happening, and then you have the reality of what's happening, and you have to work somewhere in the middle, knowing that you have to get everything you need there on the film ahead of time or in your file ahead of time, and knowing what you're going to do with it in post-processing. So it's kind of a mixture of everything between reality and what's inside of your head. And so what I'm doing now is I'm taking reality and I'm making it into what was in my head at the time I made this image. So okay, now I've got it much more even in there, and I've got it nice and light, and I'm going to take and play a little bit more with some of the blacks. I'm going to bring the blacks down just a hair, because I don't want it to get too light down there. You don't want it to be like an HDR image that's way out there. You know, I'm sure you've seen those kind of images, and you know, I've been guilty of them, and I'm sure you're guilty of them, but you've just got way too much control, and just because you can doesn't mean you should sometimes, right? So anyway, I darken that a little bit down. I like that a lot right there. So I'm going to clear this tool. And the way I'm going to clear that tool is hitting enter twice. Now, I've got a nice balance between the sky and the bottom of the image here. Now, to me, my eye is getting lost out there on the sides. You know, it gets up there in the middle and it gets off into the sides around the horizon and around the broken pier or the ruined pier in the middle there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that same gradient fill and I'm going to bring that off from the side like that. And I'm just going to drop that exposure just slightly. And it gives a little bit of a vignetting, and it stops my eye from drifting off the page at that point, drifting out of the photograph. So I like that a lot like that. I'm going to do the very same thing on the other side. Just a hair. I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. There you go. And there, I like the overall image. It's looking pretty nice there. Now, I'm going to go over here and play around with the highlights a little bit. Lifting them just a hair, just to brighten it a bit. There we go. Okay, I'm liking what I'm seeing there. Now, what I can do here on Lightroom is I can hit the F, and it gives me a full page image of that. Now you can see up here that dust spot, and there's going to be other dust spots in here, and we're going to get to that into cleaning in Photoshop. Sometimes with an old negative that's been around for a long time and been printed a lot and maybe not cared for that well, your cleanup can take a long time. I'm not predicting on this one right now. It's looking pretty good, but once I start zooming in on everything in Photoshop and I start seeing little dust specks, I like to correct them, and sometimes that takes me up to an hour per image, or maybe even more sometimes. This one's looking pretty good. I've kept this negative in pretty good shape, so we'll see. So anyway, I'll escape out of that. It's looking very nice. I like it a lot. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take it over and I'm going to export it into Photoshop so that I can do my finer tuning on that and clean up all the dust specks and things like that. And then what I'll do is I'll save it, and then I can bring it back into Lightroom for my toning process. And now I like to tone these, even if I'm not going to print this one, if it's just going to be something I'm going to upload to the web or put into one of my web galleries or something like that. I like to tone it to make it look somewhat like the print looks when I finish that print out. Now I have the experience enough of doing this a million times to know kind of what I can do with my toning in the darkroom, so therefore I can do it in the computer and kind of get a reasonable facsimile of what I'm actually going to get. So therefore when it shows up in my website, it kind of looks like the final print if somebody ever orders that print. So anyway, I'm going to take that now and I'm going to say edit in. I'm going to edit in Photoshop 2021. And I'm going to take the choice, edit a copy with Lightroom adjustments, of course, because I don't want to have to redo everything I've just done. Let's see here, edit in. There we go, edit in Photoshop 2021, we've got it. So now it's going to open up over here in Photoshop. There I've got my image, and it's quite nice. But here's where the problem is that I'm going to zoom in, and what I like to do is I like to start out in quarters. I just do quadrants first. So I've got like a quarter of the image, and I can go down there. Now you can see as I'm scrolling through here, you can see that I've got quite a few dust specks and quite a few little aberrations and things that I've got to clean up. Now I'll show you how I do a couple of those, but I won't make you sit through here through all of them. I'll skip ahead and get this done. But what I do here, now you can see that I've got a dust speck here. I've zoomed in on a dust speck that are around these rocks. Now you couldn't see it in the larger image because your eye wasn't, perceiving that in the pixels. But if you were to print out this picture and you left those dust spots in, it takes this beautiful imaginary or imagined kind of three-dimensional image, and it turns it back into a flat piece of paper because it's got this dust spot on it, right? You've got to get rid of those dust spots. You don't want them in your images. So the way that I take care of these is I go over here and I use on the side here, I use my cloning tool. And I'll skip the learn how part. I take my cloning tool, you can see it there in the center. Now what I like to do is if I hit Option, the Option key at the same time I have my clone tool out there, it turns that into a little focus thing. And what that means is that I'm sampling that area underneath my cursor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sample underneath that cursor in a place that looks exactly like the area where the dust spot is that I'm trying to replace. I'm going to sample right next to it like that, and then I remove it, and then when I move over to the speck itself, it takes the sample right from next to it, but it fills in that dust speck, and you can see it's gone. Now here's another one up here, and I can leave my tool set where it was because I have it set to take the little bit of sample next to the spot where I'm fixing. So you can see that I can put that over there, and I can heal that, and another one up here, and I can do that, and another one here, I can do that. Now you can see in the middle here where my cursor is, there's a little bit of a ghost of something there. So I'm gonna sample right next to it. I'm gonna take that out. And then I'm going to scroll over a little bit and you see this other one. It's because I'm at that same thing. It didn't work right, did it? Because I didn't have the sample in the right place. So I go up here and I say edit, undo clone stamp there. Now what I've got to do is go back and I've got to align it correctly so that it goes correctly down through the values and it clears it up correctly. And now you see it, it's gone completely. It's completely gone. A little bit of it next there, another one there. Now, so what I like to do is I like to go through the image by quadrants like this, and I can see there's plenty of things to do. Like up here, we've got another one. This is up in the sky. So what I'm going to take my option right next to it, I'm going to take my sample right next to it, and I'm just going to clean that right out of there. And there it's gone. And I'll look for some other ones up in the sky. Here I see one that's darker. There's another one there, one there. Now you can see all through here as I'm showing you through, you can see the grain in the image near the corners and things. That's one of the beauties of scanning your image in this way because it's corner to corner focus. It's sharp from corner to corner, so you don't feel like your image is dropping off where your film was curved at the edge of the scanner or something like that. So anyway, I just really like seeing that nice crisp sharpness from corner to corner when I'm going through cleaning these up like this. So anyway, I'm going to go through and clean more like this. You got the idea of how I do that, and I'll come back here in a little bit of time when I got this all cleaned up and we'll continue, okay? So, I've spared you all of the details of cleaning up this image. I spent, you can see it's probably a little darker outside, I spent the better part of an hour cleaning it up. But now I have a good raw image, and what I did is I saved one final dust speck, the one that we identified earlier in Lightroom. I saved that for you to come in here, and it'll be satisfying to take it out. You can see it up here in the top of the image, an old speck. I'm going to go down here, we're going to grab onto the clone tool, we're going to option out right next to it, and we're going to clean that speck right out. All gone. Okay, so now this is our image, as you can see. I'll go to full screen. It's quite nice. I really like it. It's a good raw image to work from, and so this is now my clean negative scan. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this, and this will get saved into an archive folder for future use. But also what I'm going to do is take this back over into Lightroom, and I'm going to show you the process that I go through to quote-unquote tone the image before putting it away or putting it up on the web or doing something. You'll see it in the video at the end of the video here, and probably is the thumbnail from the video already. But anyway, so let's go up here and we're going to say File, Save As. And I'm going to save it again as a TIFF, and I'm not changing anything else. The size is still the same. It's still a really quite a large image. Let's see, let's just go back and see what it is. Image size. We are at 240 DPI at 17 by 17 inches, which is a really nice image. I mean, if I wanted to go bigger than that, I could upsize or up-res. There's really no reason for me to go any bigger than that on an image. This image, as a matter of fact, did go into an MGM Grand Casino Spa at one time at a size of 8 foot by 8 foot. And for all I know, it's still there and it looked great. So, you know, it can be done. Yeah, so anyway, so we've got that image. We're going to go in here. We're going to say File, Save As. We're going to save it as a TIFF. I'm going to save it right now into the same folder, into my scans folder, and I'm going to save it with the same name. The raw, I'm going to replace it. Now, basically, that's just a really nice file, which all cleaned up. No more dust specks on it, okay? So there we go. We're going to say no compression. It's saved. Now, I'm going to go back over here to Lightroom. And now, in Lightroom, I am going to go back to my library. And here we've got the image that we've worked on, right? Now it's nice and cleaned up and it looks beautiful. But one thing I'd like to do is I'd like to tone this image. So I'm going to go down here to my up into my develop module, and I'm going to drop on down here to, in the newer version of this used to be in Lightroom, you might find it as split toning module, but this is the new module. It's just color grading is what it's called. And it allows you, if you look here, it allows you mid-tones, shadows, and highlights. So what I like to do when I used to tone things, I would like to split tone them in selenium and sepia. Now the sepia would go into the more highlight areas, which would give it more of a brownish, yellow-orange kind of a feel, and then the cooler tones in the sepia would go into the shadows. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to my shadows first, and I am going to drop down the color wheel down into the cooler area. And you can see what's happening to the image when I do this. I'll go all the way and it goes real blue, but basically I just want to go a little bit into the shadow detail, just a little bit like that, right? So now, and then I come over here to my highlights, and now the highlights I want to go up into this more sepia area, into the brownish yellower area. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that, and I'm going to, you can see if I go real extreme, how the highlights go real yellow and real sepia looking. I'm just going to go a little bit like that, okay? Now I like that. I like that balance. As you can see, it's a pretty nice balance. We'll go to full view, and it's pretty nice. It looks almost like what one of my silver prints would have looked like back in the day when I had made this image and toned it. And now I'll go back. Now I can play around with some of my intensity here. Now it gives you a slider to play around with your luminosity. I can drop the luminosity down a little bit and make it a little more crisp, like that right there. And now you've got these sliders down here in the bottom, blending and balance. Now balance would be shifting between the two colors that you added. Now, and blending would be the blend of them somewhere in the middle there. So you can play around with those sliders and see what it does for you. Now you can see with the blending, it kind of takes away some of that cool and it makes it a little more warm. I don't like that so much. I kind of like where I was, maybe a little bit up like that. And now the balance, again, you can see how it goes towards the blue or towards the sepia. I like to keep the balance just about where I was, kind of in the middle. I think that's really nice. Now that I've done that, I'm going to export this once again into Photoshop so that I can save it as a new file. I never want to save my original raw file as anything but that, you know what I mean? That's going to be my go-to file in the future whenever I want to make that print. But this file is something different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to export this again to Photoshop. So I'll right-click and I'll say Edit in Photoshop. Now let me go make sure that I've gotten the other one out. Nope, I got to take this one out because if you don't do that, Photoshop gets confused and it won't open up the new image. Okay, so let's go back to Lightroom. And I'm going to right-click and I'm going to say Edit in Photoshop 2021. Edit the copy with Lightroom adjustments like before. And then now I'm in Photoshop and you can see the image as it's done now and completely toned the way it was. Now I'm going to take that file and I'm going to size it for the web. I'm just going to size it at 72 dpi because there's no point in doing anything that's going to go on a computer monitor that's any higher than 72 dpi. And I'm going to drop that down in pixel size. I want it to be, I'm going to do it for 4K, so I'm going to do it around 4600 pixels. Okay. And I'm going to save that, or I'm going to size that. And now I'm going to save this one as, and I'm going to save this as a JPEG just because it's going to be used on the web or in a thumbnail. So I've got my peer ruin. I'm just going to say final. I'm going to save that in my scans as well. So there, I've got that image. Now, to go back, we'll go back to Lightroom now, and I'll show you through a cool little trick here that they have to split the screen like that. You can see, so this is my before and this is my after, and you can see what I did there. Now if I hit Y again, it'll show you my after, it'll show you my split. If I do Shift Y, it'll show you side by side. So you can see what I've done there. We've got a really nice image in the beginning, the black and white image, but I've added some nice toning in that. And that toning gives it a little more creamy feel and a little bit more, I don't know, just a little more satisfying feel to it. And basically that's the tones that I like to go with. I'm sure that you have something different that you like to do, or maybe you just are very purist and you just like to go with the strict black and white. That's all fine and dandy. I'm just showing you kind of how to be able to do it here. So anyway, let's go back. We'll look at full screen again on our image. It's looking really good. So there you go. I mean, it's quite a process to go through, and maybe a little more difficult than putting something on the scanner. but you're getting a much better image, and I think it's of drum quality scan. I mean, I would take this negative, I say negative, I would take this base file, this raw file, and I would work it on anything now, you know what I mean? I feel like it's finished. I don't feel like anything else needs to be done with it. To me, it's just like the negative in the sleeve now. It's something that I can make prints from here until the end of my days. Anyway, so I hope this helps you see what you're doing here. Now, another thing that I didn't mention in my whole setup here is that my D810 is equipped right now with a 60mm macro lens. I highly recommend getting a new digital version, one that goes with your digital cameras. Don't try to use one of your old macro lenses, because that way you won't be able to control it from the computer like I've showed you. And that lens and camera combination, along with the tether cord, plugging it into your computer, is really all you need, other than the software to run the capture or run the tether. So I'm hoping this helped you. If you liked it, give me a thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already. I'm still having a lot of fun with these. I've had a lot of nice suggestions from everybody. Thank you to all of you that have been signing on to my Patreon. That link is below as well. I really appreciate the support. I mean, even $1 a month just helps, and it helps me make these videos, and it helps me share the knowledge of all of this. Again, there's some trips coming up. I hope that you'll look at those links as well. I'd like to say before I go, I'd like to thank Hahnemühle for sponsorship. They've been really good in supplying papers and things that I use in these workshop demos and things that I give you. And here's the other kicker. If you've waited around to the end, you're going to get this little special treat. If you look below, there'll be an email address for Hahnemühle USA that you send your email. Put my name in that email, along with a request for a sample pack of the platinum rag paper that they do, and they will send you a sample kit of their platinum rag paper that I like to use so much in these videos. So anyway, be sure to do that. They know that I'm doing this, and they know they're ready for you to come. I know that they've been getting some orders already through my Patreon channel, where I've mentioned this already. Thank you very much for watching, and stick around for the next one. We're going to do something interesting. I always try to do something interesting. Anyway, take care of yourselves, and bye-bye.